relation to two others. The abyss between ideal and actual. 4. The point, defined by 3 coordinates, matter. 5. Motion, time. The womb, for only through motion and in time can events occur. 6. The point, now self-conscious, because able to define itself in terms of above. 7. The point's idea of bliss, ananda. 8. The point's idea of thought, chit. 9. The point's idea of being, sat. 10. The point's idea of itself fulfilled in its complement, as determined by 7, 8 and 9. It will be seen from the above that by means of these 10 positive numbers, but not by any lesser number, one can arrive at a positive description of any given object or idea. So far, the argument has been erected on a rigid, mathematical basis, with only the slightest tincture of philosophy to give it form. But it is at this point that, for the purpose of describing the object's thought and sense, one is compelled to join hands with the astrologers. The problem now is to assign to pure number the moral ideas which go with it. This is partly a matter of experience, partly tradition derived from older experience. It would be unwise to discard tradition with complete contempt, because all thinking is bound by the laws of the mind itself, and mind has been formed rough thousands of years of evolution in each man by the thoughts of his ancestors. The cells of all living brains are just as much the children of the great thinkers of the past as the development of the organs and limbs. There are very few people today who have heard of Plato and Aristotle. Not 1 in 1,000, perhaps 10,000, of those have ever read either of them, even in translations. But there are also very few people whose thinking, such as it is not conditioned by the ideas of those two men. In the Tree of Life, therefore, is found the first attempt to connect the ideal with the actual. The Kabbalists say, for example, that the number 7 contains the idea of Venus, and the number 8 that of Mercury, that the connecting path between I and 6 refers to the moon, and that between 3 and 6 to the sign of Gemini. Then what is the true meaning, in the category of the real, of these planets and signs? Here again one is faced with the impossibility exact definition, because the possibilities of research are infinite. Also, at any moment in any research, the one idea merges into the her and clouds the exact definition of the images. But this, of course, is the objective. These are all blind steps on the way to the real light, when the universe is perceived as one, yet with all its lights, each necessary and each distinct. The beginning of this work is, however, easy enough. One requires no more than elementary classical knowledge. Roughly taking, for a start, the natures of the planets are described by those of the gods after whom the actual bodies in heaven were named, according to the old astrological ideas of their influence on the affairs of men. The same is true, to a less extent, of the signs of the zodiac. There is not so much information available about their natures, but it is helpful to note which planet rules which sign, and in which sign which planets are exalted. The individual fixed stars do not enter into the system of the tarot. The tarot and the Tree of Life. The tarot, while based on these theoretical attributions, was designed as a practical instrument for Kabbalistic calculations and for divination. In it is little place for abstract ideas. The subject of the book The Tarot is called the Book of Thought. Uti is the influence of the 10 numbers and the 22 letters on man, and his best methods of manipulating their forces. There is therefore no mention of the 3 veils of the negative, which was discussed in the description of the Tree of Life. The description begins with the small cards, numbered 1 to 10. These are divided into 4 suits according to the 4 elements. Thus the Ace of Wands is called the root of the forces of fire. It pertains to Kether, and purports to represent the first positive manifestation of the idea of fire. The 2 pertains to Chokmah. But here is already no more the simplicity of the idea of fire. An idea in action or in manifestation is no more the pure idea. This card is attributed to the first decan of the fiery sign Aries, which is ruled by Mars. This, then, gives the idea of a violent and aggressive force. The card is therefore called the Lord of Dominion. This progressive degradation of the idea of fire goes on increasing through the suit. Each successive card becomes less ideal and more actual, increasingly so until, with the number 6 which corresponds to the sun, the center of the whole system, the fiery idea resurges, balanced, hence pure, although complex. Beyond this, the force is beginning to expend itself, or to spiritualize itself, in the cards of the decan of Sagittarius. But the best fixation of the fiery force is found in the 9, which number is the foundation of the structure of the tree of life. Thus the card is called the Lord of Strength. The fire has been purified, etherealized and balanced. But in the 10, showing complete materialization and numiety, the effect of fire is pushed to its extreme limit. Its death is impending, but it reacts against this as best it can by appearing as the Lord of Oppression, formidable on the surface, but with the seeds of decay already sprouting. The above summary can easily be applied by the student to the other suits. The court cards are 16 in number, 4 to each suit. There is thus a subdivision of each element into its own system. The knights represent the element of fire, so that the Knight of Wands represents the fiery part of fire, the Knight of Cups, the fiery part of water. Similarly, the princesses or empresses represent earth, so that the Empress of Discs, coins, or pentacles, represents the earthy part of earth. These cards have many manifestations in natural phenomena. Thus, the Knight of Wands has the attribution of Aries, and represents swift violence of onset, the lightning flash. But the airy part of fire is sympathetic with Leo, the steady force of energy, the Sunday. Lastly, in the watery part of fire, the harmony is with Sagittarius, which shows the fading, spiritualized reflection or translucence of the image of fire, and this suggests the rainbow. See Table of the Triplicities of the Zodiac. The Atu of Ta'uti, or the 22 Houses of Wisdom, or the 22 Trumps of the Tarot. Atu, house or key, in ancient Egyptian. Ta'uti, Egyptian god of wisdom, magic, science, also illusion. In Coptic, Thoth. In Greek, Hermes. In Latin, Mercury. The Hindu and Scandinavian gods corresponding are debased forms. 22 is the number of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It is the number of the paths of the Sefer Yetzirah. These paths are the paths which join the 10 numbers on the figure called the Tree of Life. Why are there 22 of them? Because that is the number of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and one letter goes to each path. Why should this be so? Why should these paths be arranged on the tree in the way that the diagram shows? Why should there not be paths connecting the numbers 2 and 5 and the numbers 3 and 4? One cannot answer any of these questions. Who knows how God leave an ox to be no camel, quoth the Jews, like G. Browning? One knows only that this was the conventional arrangement adopted by whoever it was that devised the tarot. What is worse, it seems very confusing, very annoying. It shakes one's faith in these great sages. But at least there is no doubt that this is so. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet are 22. There are 3 mother letters for the elements, 7 double letters for the planets, and 12 single letters for the signs of the zodiac. But there are 4 elements, not 3. Or, including the element of spirit, an important matter to initiates, there are 5. There are therefore 2 letters of the alphabet which have to do double duty. The element of fire is very close kin to the idea of spirit, so the letter Shin, belonging to fire, may be taken to mean spirit as well. There is a special reason why this should be so, although it only applies in later ages, since the introduction of the dogma that spirit rules the 4 elements, and the formation of the pentagram of salvation connected with the Hebrew word Yeshua. With regard to earth, it was considered adequate to make the letter Tau, belonging to Saturn, correspond also to Earth. These additions are clear evidence that the tarot took definite and arbitrary steps to assert the new discovery in magic some 2,000 years ago, for no system is more rigid than a Hebrew system, and the system of the Sefer Yetzirah is the deepest rooted of all the elements of the Hebrew system, the most dogmatic of them all. The tarot is justified not by faith, but by works. The departures from the original bone dry Kabbalah have been justified by experience. The point, raised above, about the way in which the paths are selected to join certain numbers and not others, is found to express important doctrines connected with the facts of initiation. It must always be borne in mind that the tarot is not only an atlas for recording facts, but a guidebook showing one how to travel through these countries previously unknown. Travelers in China are somewhat bewildered at first when they are told that it is 100 li from Yongchang to Pupeng, but only 40 li from Pupeng to Yongchang. The answer is that the li is a measure of the time of marching, not of miles. The difference of calculation informs one that Pupeng is a long way up the hill. It is very much the same with the tarot. The Six of Wands is referred to Jupiter in Leo, and called the Lord of Victory. This dictates not only what victory is like, but also the conditions to be fulfilled in order to obtain victory. There is need of the fiery energy of the suit of wands, the balance of the number 6, the stubborn courage of Leo, and also the influence of Jupiter, the little bit of luck that tips the scale. These considerations are particularly important in dealing with the Atu, or drums. The planets are already represented in the numbers or Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. But they have also attributions to certain of the paths. Some etymologists of a singularly idle disposition have tried to derive the French word atout from the Atta meaning house. It may seem simpler to suggest that atout is short for bon atout, meaning good for anything, because a trump will take any card of any suit. The Atuatauti, who is the Lord of Wisdom, are also called keys. They are guides to conduct. They give you the map of the kingdom of heaven, and also the best way to take it by force. A complete understanding of any magical problem is necessary before it can be solved. Study from outside, and action from outside, are ways abortive. It is of the utmost importance to understand this extremely specialized character of the drums. To say that the trump numbered 3, called the Empress, represents Venus, means something much less and also much more than appears if Venus be studied from a strictly astrological standpoint. One abandons the contemplation of the whole in order to take practical advantage of a part. Just so tactics differs from strategy. A Greek general does not think of war in the abstract, but confines his attention to a minute part of his perhaps vast knowledge of the subject by considering the disposition of his forces at a given place and time. How best to weigh them against his adversary is of course true not only of the trumps, but of all the other cards, and it must be true of any specialized studies. If one goes into a shop and asks for a map of a certain country, one cannot get a complete map, because any such map would necessarily merge into the universe as it approached completeness, for a country's character is modified by the adjacent countries, and so on forever. Nor would even any useful map be complete in the most vulgar practical way without leading to confusion. The shopman would want to know whether his customer wanted a geological map, an orographical map, a commercial map, a map showing the distribution of population, or a strategic map, and so on forever. The student of the tarot must not therefore expect to find anything beyond the careful selection of the facts about any given card, a selection made for a quite definite magical purpose. However, the tarot does try to resume, in a single pictorial symbol, as many as possible of the useful aspects of the idea. In studying any card, one ought not to neglect any of the attributions, because each class of attribution does modify the form and color of the card, and its use. This essay will endeavor, in the section describing each card in turn, to include as many of the correspondences as possible. The Roman numbers of the trumps. Some paragraphs of this section repeat, in slightly different phrases, statements already made in earlier pages. This is intended. The trumps are numbered in Roman figures in order to avoid confusion with the Arabic numbers of the Sephiroth. It has puzzled the traditional writers on the tarot that these numbers should run from 0 to 21. They seem to have thought that it would be proper to assume that 0 was the fool, because he was a cipher, a good-for-nothing. They made this assumption simply because they did not know the secret doctrine of the Kabbalistic 0. They did not know elementary mathematics. They did not know that mathematicians begin the decimal scale with 0. To make it quite clear to initiates that they did not understand the meaning of the card called the Fool, they put him down between ATA cards 20 and 21, for what reason it baffles the human imagination to conceive. They then attributed the card number I, the jugular, to the letter Aleph. In this simple yet ingenious manner the attribution of every card, except the universe, 21, wrong. Meanwhile, the true attribution was well guarded in the sanctuary. It only became public when the secret lection issued to members of the grade of practicus of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was published as a result of the catastrophe attending the English branch of the order in 1899 and 1900, EV, and the reconstruction of the whole order in March and April, 1904, EV by putting the card marked 0 in its proper place, where any mathematician would have put it. The attributions fall into a natural order which is confirmed by every investigation. There was, however, one kink in the rope. The card called Adjustment is marked 8. The card called Lust is marked 11. To maintain the natural sequence, Lust must be attributed to Libra, and Adjustment to Leo. The old titles of these cards were respectively Strength and Justice. They are inadequate or misleading. This is evidently wrong, because the card called Adjustment actually shows a woman with sword and scales, while the card called Lust shows a woman and a lion. It was quite impossible to understand why this reversal should have taken place until the events of March and April, 1904, which are recounted in detail in the Equinox of the Gods. One need here give only one quotation. All these old letters of my book are aright, but J is not the star. Al. 1.57. This was making darkness deeper. It was clear that the attribution of the star to the letter Tsodi was unsatisfactory, and the question arose, how to find another card which would take its place. An incredible amount of work was done on this, in vain. After nearly 20 years the solution appeared. The star represents Nuit, the starry heavens. I am infinite space, and the infinite stars thereof. Al. 1.22. She is represented with 2 vases, one pouring water, a symbol of light, upon herself, the other upon the earth. This is a glyph of the economy of the universe. It continually pours forth energy and continually reabsorbs it. It is the realization of perpetual motion, which is never true of any part, but necessarily true of the whole. For, if it were not so, there would be something disappearing into nothing, which is mathematically absurd. The principle of Carnot, the second law of thermodynamics, is only true in finite equations. The card which must be exchanged for the star is the Emperor, who bears the number 4, which signifies power, authority, law, and is attributed to the sign Aries. This proves very satisfactory. But it became infinitely more so as soon as it was seen that this substitution cleared up the other mystery about strength and justice. For Leo and Libra are, by this exchange, shown as revolved about Virgo, the 6th sign of the zodiac, which balances the revolution of Aries and Aquarius about Pisces, the 12th sign. This is a reference to a peculiar secret of the ancients which was very deeply studied by Godfrey Higgins and others of his school. It is useless to go far into the matter here, but the position is made clear enough by the accompanying diagram. It will be seen at a glance that now, for the first time, is a perfect symmetry established in the tarot. The justice of the exchange is evident when one considers etymology. It is natural that the Great Mother should be attributed to He, which is her letter in the Tetragrammaton, while the letter Tsodi is the natural letter of the Emperor in the original phonetic system, as shown in the words Tsar, Kaiser, Caesar, Senior, Sacred, Sephler, Signor, Sir. The tarot and magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. In other words, it is science, pure and applied. This thesis has been worked out at great length by Dr. Sir J.G. Fraser. But in common parlance the word magic has been used to mean the kind of science which ordinary people do not understand. It is in this restricted sense, for the most part, that the word will be used till this essay. The business of science is to explore nature. Its first questions are, what is this? How did it come to be? What are its relations with any other object? The knowledge acquired may then be used in applied science, which asks, how can we best employ such and such a thing or idea for the purpose that, to us, seems fit? An example may make this clear. The Greeks of old were aware that by rubbing amber, which they called electron, upon silk, the amber acquired the power of attracting to itself light objects such as small pieces of wood. Their science was hoodwinked by theological and philosophical theories of the a priori type. It was well over 2,000 years before this phenomenon was correlated with other electrical phenomena. The idea of measurement was hardly known to anyone but mathematicians like Archimedes and astronomers. The foundations of science, as it is understood today, were hardly laid at all 200 years ago. There was an immense amount of knowledge, but it was nearly all qualitative. The classification of phenomena depended chiefly upon poetic analogies. The doctrines of correspondences and signatures were based upon fanciful resemblances. Cornelius Agrippa wrote of the antipathy between a dolphin and a whirlpool. If a meretrix sat under an olive tree, it would bear no more fruit. If anything looked like something else, it partook in some mysterious way of its qualities. This sounds today to many people mere superstitious ignorance and nonsense, but it is not altogether so. The old system of classification was sometimes good and sometimes bad, as far as it went. But in no case did it go very far. The natural ingenuity of their natural philosophers did compensate very largely for the weakness of their theory, and it did ultimately lead them, especially through alchemy, where they were forced by the nature of the work to add real to their ideal observation, to introduce the idea of measure. Modern science, intoxicated by the practical success which attended this innovation, has simply shut the door on anything that cannot be measured. The old guard refuses to discuss it, but the loss is immense. Obsession with strictly physical qualities has blocked out all real human values. The science of the tarot is entirely based upon this older system. The calculations involved are very precise, but they never lose sight of the incommensurable and the imponderable. The theory of animism was always present in the minds of the medieval masters. Any natural object possessed not only its material characteristics, but it was a manifestation of a more or less tangible idea on which it depended. The pool was a pool, true, but also there was a nymph whose home it was. In her turn, she was dependent on a superior kind of nymph, who was much less closely attached to any given pool, but more to pools in general, and so on, up to the supreme lady of water, who exercised a general supervision over her whole dominion. She, of course, was subject to the general ruler of all the four elements. It was exactly the same idea as in the case of the police constable, who has his sergeant, inspector, superintendent, commissioner, always getting more cloudy and remote until you reach the shadowy home secretary, who is, himself, the servant of a completely intangible and incalculable phantom called the will of the people. We may doubt how far the personification of these entities was conceived as real by the ancients, but the theory was that while anyone with a pair of eyes could see the pool, he could not see the nymph except by some accident. But they thought that a superior type of person, by dint of searching, study and experiment, might acquire this general power. A person still more advanced in this science could get into real connection with the superior, because subtler forms of life. He could perhaps cause them to manifest themselves to him in material shape. A good deal of this rests upon the Platonic ideology, which maintained that any material object was an impure and imperfect copy of some ideal perfection. So men who wished to advance in spiritual science and philosophy strove always to formulate for themselves a pure idea. They tried to proceed from the particular to the general, and this principle has been of the greatest service to ordinary science. The mathematics for 6 plus 5 equals 11, and 12 plus 3 equals 15, was all in bits. Advance only came when they wrote down their equations in general terms. x2 y2 equals x plus y. xy covers all possible cases of subtracting the square of one number from the square of another. So the meaningless and abstract, when understood, has far more meaning than the intelligible and concrete. These considerations apply to the cards taken from the tarot. What is the meaning of the Five of Wands? This card is subject to the Lord of Fire, because it is a wand, and to the Sephira Genera because it is a 5. It is also subject to the sign Leo, and to the planet Saturn, because this planet and sign determine the nature of the card. This is no more than saying that a dry martini has got some juniper in it, and some alcohol, and some white wine and herbs, and a bit of lemon peel, and some ice. It is a harmonious composition of various elements. Once mixed, it forms a single compound from which it would be very difficult to separate the ingredients, yet each element is necessary to the composition. The Five of Wands is therefore a personality. The nature of this is summed up in the tarot by calling it strife. This means that, if used passively in divination, one says, when it turns up, there is going to be a fight. If used actively, it means that the proper course of conduct is to contend. But there is a further point about this card. It is governed from the angelic world by two beings, one during the hours of light, the other during the hours of darkness. Therefore, in order to use the properties of this card, one way is to get into communication with the intelligence concerned, and to induce him to execute his function. There are thus 72 angels set over the 36 small cards. These are derived from the great name of God of 72 letters, called Shemam-Farashk. The Shemam-Farashk and the tarot, this word means the divided name. The name is Tetragrammaton, IHVH, commonly called Jehovah. He is the supreme lord of the four elements which compose fundamentally the whole universe. There are 3 verses in Exodus 14, 19, 20, 21, each containing 72 letters. By writing down the first of these, and underneath this the next verse backwards, and under this again the last verse forwards, 72 columns of 3 letters each are obtained. These are read downwards, and the terminations al or are, according as they are male or female, appended. There is also an attribution of these intelligences, one to each of the quinaries or segments of 5 degrees of the zodiac, but there are also innumerable other angels, demons, magical images, lords of triplicities, lesser assistant angels and so on, with demons to correspond. It is quite useless to study all these attributions. They could only be wanted in case of wishing to get into actual communication with one of these for some special purpose. These matters are here mentioned for the sake of completeness, but the tarot will lose all its vitality for one who allows himself to be sidetracked by its pedantry. The tarot and ceremonial magic. The tarot is, thus, intimately bound up with the purely magical arts of invocation and evocation. By invocation is meant the aspiration to the highest, the purest form of the part of oneself that one wishes to put into action. Evocation is much more objective. It does not imply perfect sympathy. One's attitude to the being evoked may even be, at least superficially, hostile. Then, of course, the further advanced one is in initiation, the less the idea of hostility enters one's mind. Tout comprendra, first tout pardon. Thus, in order to understand any given card, one must identify oneself with it completely for the moment, and one way of doing this is to induce or compel the intelligence ruling the card to manifest to the senses. For, as explained above, the ancient theory of the universe included the thesis that every object in nature possessed a spiritual guardian. Roughly speaking, this did not apply so much to manufactured objects, though there are exceptions to this, as in the case of the gods of the hearth, the lintel, and the like, or of angels or spirits as supposed to be interested in one's sword or one's spear. A particularly powerful weapon was likely to get the reputation of not having been manufactured at all by human hands, but forged in volcanoes or in fairyland, and thus imbued with preternatural powers. Some famous swords had names, and were regarded as living beings. They were liable to fly out of the window if the owner played about too much, instead of killing people. as is proper. The tarot and animism, it is only natural, therefore, that at a time when pictorial or written representations of ideas were beyond the comprehension of any but a very few people, when writing itself was considered magical, and printing, as it is, an invention of the devil, people should regard hieroglyphs, whether written or pictured, as living things having power in themselves. It may be that, even today, there are houses in darkest Shropshire where anyone who put another book on the top of the family Bible would be told never to darken those doors again. Automatic action is everywhere ascribed to inanimate objects, for instance, horseshoes on doors. There is an entire class of such superstitions. The problem of how any given superstition arose has not always been satisfactorily solved. One can, ignorantly, derive the sitting down 13 at table nonsense from the legend of the Last Supper. Incidentally, it can hardly have been the first time that those 13 sat down to table. But the really primitive superstitions cannot be explained so simply. It seems more probable that they arose from the unscientific habit, extremely common among men of science, of generalizing from too few facts. It might happen by chance that on half a dozen occasions within a short period, a hunter, setting out at full moon, was killed. The old fallacy of post hoc propter hoc would come in, and the village would say, "It is unlucky to go out hunting at full moon." This would gather force, as it was repeated through the generations, by virtue of mental indolence, and it would not be disturbed, because taboo would render the original coincidence unlikely to recur. If, however, something similar came off at the new moon, there would be a new superstition, and presently there would be a complete nexus of taboo about the moon. A recent case. The late Mr. S. L. Mathers published, in 1898-9, the translation of a manuscript called The Sacred Magic of Oberlin the Mage in a small private edition. Some hundreds of people bought it. One special group of purchasers under his personal observation were all, or nearly all, hit by misfortune. Within a year, people were saying that it was terribly dangerous to have the book on one's shelves. Would this theory have resisted statistical examination? Who can say? But, curiously enough, in 1938 TV, a neglected copy was taken from its hiding place on an obscure shelf. Immediately, disasters occurred to most of the people concerned, and to those with whom they were in close relationship. Post hoc propter hoc. But who can be sure? The cards of the tarot as living beings. Victorian science, flushed with its victory over supernaturalism, was quite right to declare the immeasurable out of bounds. It had a right to do so on technical grounds, and it was a strategical necessity of its offensive, but it hampered itself by limiting its scope. It laid itself open to the deadliest attacks from philosophy. Then, especially from the angle of mathematical physics, its own generals betrayed its dogmatism. The essence of science today is far more mysterious than the cloudiest speculations of Leibniz, Spinoza or Hegel. The modern definition of matter reminds one irresistibly of the definition of spirit given by such mystics as Rais Proek, Bohm and Molinos. The idea of the universe in the mind of a modern mathematician is singularly reminiscent of the ravings of William Blake. But the mystics were all wrong when they were pious, and held that their mysteries were too sacred to analyze. They ought to have brought in the idea of measure. This is exactly what was done by the magicians and Kabbalists. The difficulty has been that the units of measurement have themselves been somewhat elastic, they even tend to be literary. Their definitions were as circular as, but not more fugitive than, the definitions of the physicists of today. Their methods were empirical, though they strove to make them accurate, as well as lack of precise measures and standard apparatus permitted, because they had not yet formulated any true scientific theory. But their successes were numerous. All depended on individual skill. One would rather trust oneself in illness to the born physician than to the laboratory experts of Battle Creek. One of the great differences between ancient and modern chemistry is the idea of the alchemists that substance in its natural state is, in some way or other, a living thing. The modern tendency is to insist on the measurable. One can go into a museum and see rows of glass globes and bottles which contain the chemical substances which go to make up the human body, but the collection is very far from being a man. Still less does it explain the difference between Lord Tomory and Bill Sykes. 19th century chemists were at great pains to analyze opium and isolate its alkaloids, rather like a child pulling a watch to pieces to see what makes it go. They succeeded, but the results were not altogether wholesome. Morphine has much more direct hypnotic effect than opium. Its action is speedier and more violent. But it is also a very dangerous drug, and its effects are often disastrous. The action of morphine is sensibly modified by the other 20-odd alkaloids which exist in opium. The intoxicating effect of alcohol differs according to whether one absorbs it in rich bug 29 or in synthetic gin. An even more startling example comes from Venezuela, where running messengers chew coca leaves, cover their 100 miles a day, and sleep till they are rested. They have no bad reaction, and they do not acquire the habit. Cocaine is a different story. The adepts of the tarot would say, quite simply, we are alive and the plant is alive, so we can make friends. If you kill the plant first, you are asking for trouble. All this is here written in defense of the system of the makers and users of the tarot, of their methods of dealing with nature, of making experiments without undue attention to the wish to get things done quickly. They would expose a mixture to the rays of the sun or moon for weeks or months, thinking that everything would be spoiled if they boiled it up violently. The processes of nature, they would say, are slow and temperate. Let us copy them. There may have been good grounds for these views. Experience leads to the conclusion. This is by way of introduction to a thesis most necessary to the understanding of the tarot. Each card is, in a sense, a living being, and its relations with its neighbors are what one might call diplomatic. It is for the student to build these living stones into his living. The tarot and the universe. The tarot is a pictorial representation of the forces of nature as conceived by the ancients according to a conventional symbolism. The sun is a star. Around him revolve a number of bodies called planets, including the moon, a satellite of the earth. These bodies revolve in one direction only. The solar system not a sphere, but a wheel. The planets do not remain inexact but swing to a certain, comparatively small, extent from one side of the true plane to the other. Their orbits are elliptical. The ancients imagined this wheel very much more clearly than modern minds are wont to do. They paid particular attention to the imaginary rim. Within the limits of this rim, they conceived that the fixed stars beyond were in a special way connected with the apparent motion of the Sunday. This rim or belt of the wheel they called the zodiac. The constellations outside this belt did not seem to them to matter so much to mankind, because they were not in the direct line of the great whirling force of the wheel. TROROTA equals wheel. Theories of the ancients. 1. In old times, it was supposed that the earth was the center of the universe. The heavens being above the earth, they did not realize them as being equally below it. They were accounted as of the divine nature. And as they recognized imperfections and irregularity in mundane affairs, they thought that the movements of the heavenly bodies, which they observed to be regular, must be perfect. They then started some a priori thinking. Their mathematicians had the idea that a circle was a perfect figure. Therefore, they said, with characteristic theological reasoning, all heavenly bodies must move in circles. This religious assumption caused great trouble to the astronomers. As their measurements became more extended and accurate, they found it increasingly difficult to reconcile observation with theory, at least to do so without putting themselves to vast inconvenience in their calculations. So they invented cycles and epicycles to explain the observed movements. Ultimately, Copernicus was goaded by this annoyance to suggest that it would really be very much more convenient, if only the idea were not so wicked, to imagine that the sun, and not the earth, was the center of the system. In mathematics there are no fixed facts. Bertrand Russell says that in this subject nobody knows what he is talking about, and it matters to nobody whether he is right or wrong. For example, begin with the assumption that the moon is the immovable center of the universe. Nobody can contradict it. One simply switches the calculations over to suit. The practical objection to this is that it would not facilitate the work of navigators. It is important to have this idea in one's mind, because otherwise one fails to grasp the whole spirit of modern science philosophy. It does not aim at truth. It does not conceive of truth, in any ordinary sense of the word, as possible. It aims at maximum convenience. They did not understand that the circle is only one case of the ellipse, that in which the foci coincide. 2. To return to the picture of the solar system. The sun is the hub of the wheel. The outermost planet is on its rim, and beyond. But laterally within that rim are the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Why 12? The first rough division of the circle is into 4, according to the observed seasons. This choice may also have been influenced by the division of the elements into 4: fire, air, water, earth. These do not mean the objects now understood by these words, as explained above. Perhaps because they thought it necessary to introduce so sacred a number as 3 into everything heavenly, or else because the observed constellations happen to be naturally divided into 12 groups, they divided the zodiac into 12 signs, 3 to each season. The influence of the sun upon the earth was observed to change as he passed through the signs. So did quite simple things like the measure of time between sunrise and sunset. When one says that the sun enters the sign of Aries, one means that if a straight line were drawn from the earth to the sun and prolonged to the stars, that line would pass through the beginning of that constellation. Suppose, for instance, that one observes the full moon on the first day of spring, one will be able to see, behind her, the stars of the beginning of Libra, the sign opposite to Aries. It was observed that the moon took approximately 28 days to pass from full to full, and to each day was assigned W hat was called a mansion. Her mysterious influence was supposed to change in each mansion. This theory does not enter directly into the tarot, but it must be mentioned to help to clear up a certain confusion which is about to complicate the question. 3. Early astronomers calculated that the sun took 360 days to go round the zodiac. This was a closely guarded secret of the land, so they concealed it in the divine name Mithras, which adds up, according to the Greek convention, M40, I10, TH. 9, a 100, a 1, S200, to 360. Better observation showed 365 days to be more accurate, so they decided to call it a Bruxas, a 1, B2, a 100, a 1, X60, a 1, S200. When the others found this out, they put themselves right by altering the spelling of Mithras to Mithras, which adds, like a Bruxas, to 365. In this there is still an error of not quite 6 hours, so that, in the course of centuries, the calendar kept slipping. It did not assume its present form until the time of Pope Gregory. The point of all this, that they divided the circle of the zodiac into 360 degrees, is that this is a convenient basis for calculation. Each angular measure of 10 degrees was called a decanate. Of these there are thus 36, dividing each sign of the zodiac into 3 sections. It was supposed that the influence of the sign was very swift and fierce in the first decan, powerful and balanced in the second, spiritualized and deciduous in the third. A short digression. One of the most important doctrines of the ancients was that of the macrocosm and the microcosm. Man is himself a little universe. He is a minute copy of the big universe. This argument was, of course, worked backwards, so the characteristics above given of the qualities of the 3 decans in a sign were probably due to an analogy with the course of a man's life. 4. The above remarks constitute a fairly complete idea of the arbitrary, or mostly arbitrary, presentation of the cosmos by the ancients. First of all, the division into 4 elements. These elements pervade everything. They would argue something like this about the Sunday. They would say that he was principally fire, for obvious reasons, but he would have also in him the airy quality of mobility. The watery part would be shown by his power to create images, and the earthy part, his immense stability. Similarly, of a serpent, they would call his power of death fiery, his swiftness, airy, his undulatory motion, watery, and his habit of life, earthy. These descriptions are obviously quite inadequate. They have to be filled up by attributing planetary qualities and zodiacal qualities to all objects. Thus, the bull in the zodiac is an earthy sign, and this is the central sign of the three through which the sun passes during spring. But the bovine nature is also gentle, wherefore they said that Venus rules the sign of Taurus. The cow, moreover, is the principal milk-giving animal, so they made her the great mother goddess, thus identifying her with the moon, the mother of heaven, as the sun is the father. They represented this idea by saying that the moon is exalted in Taurus, that is, that she exerts the most beneficent aspect of her influence when she is in that sign. 5. It is confusing at first, but most instructive and illuminating when the principle is thoroughly assimilated, to note how all these elements subdivide and coalesce. One can only reach the comprehension of any one of these symbols by making a composite picture of it, one composed of all the others in varying proportion. Thus each of the planets gives a certain portion of its influence to any object. This habit of thought leads to an understanding of the unity of nature, with its proper and spiritual exaltation, which could hardly be attained in any other way. It produces an internal harmony which ends in an acceptance of life and of nature. It is now almost time to analyze and define the traditional characteristics of these symbols. But perhaps it would be better, first of all, to build on a sure foundation by consideration of the number 2, which hitherto has not been taken into account. There are only two operations possible in the universe: analysis and synthesis. To divide, and to unite. Solvet coagula, said the alchemists. If anything is to be changed, either one must divide one object into two parts, or add another unit to it. This principle lies at the basis of all scientific thought and work. The first thought of the man of science is classification, measurement. He says, this oak leaf is like that oak leaf, this oak leaf is unlike this beech leaf. Until one has grasped this fact, one has not begun to understand scientific method. The ancients were fully cognizant of this idea. The Chinese, in particular, based their whole philosophy on this primary division of the original nothing. One must begin with nothing, otherwise the question would arise, whence came this postulated something? So they wrote the equation, 0 equals plus 1 plus minus 1, 0 equals plus 1 plus minus 1. Plus 1 they called the yang, or male principle, minus 1, the yin or female principle. These then combine in varying proportion, giving the idea of heaven and earth in perfect balance, the sun and the moon in perfect balance, and the four elements in unbalanced form. See diagram at right. The Chinese cosmos. This Chinese arrangement is thus tenfold, and has been shown to be admirably equivalent to the system which had
time. Look, I can accept you without agreeing.
been here examined. 6. The ancient.
Time. Notice.
I think that's like coming to Clown House, because technically when you jerk it, you're projecting and you're...
I'm doing everything I can by law, just to, you know.
Here's the thing, I've been friends with Jazzy or Jazzy.
What happened after that? Did they run away or something? Yeah. Hi.
Well, your dad is...
Scheme of the elements.
Fucking campaign.
Welcome to War, Shay! Welcome, Shay, to War! Hi, Shay!
I started Josh Sellers and named it after my dad, my wife Dee and I would go watch the horse races. She'd always bet.
Hi, Abby. Hi, Abby. Welcome to war. What are you doing? Shouldn't you be sleeping? Are you at the grocery store with coupons? Are you at the office making photocopies? Did you leave the window open? Welcome to AdrianDittman.com War! Do you want to say anything, Abby, or are you just here to voyeur? Whew. I almost knocked over a phone, Abby. My people will be free from the river to the sea. Yeah, he called. We worked it out. I think I kind of worried about him because, like, I think maybe he does have some mental health problems. So, you know. Anyways, we talked, but like I was still like upset, and but then I realized I think I might know who he is. I thought it was actually somebody from my college. I think originally, but then I was like, oh, this is just like some random internet person. Almost everybody, like not almost everybody, but everybody on this app is like very random, which in many ways is like a good thing. And I think anonymity is so important. Yeah, I know, but like the point is, I think I don't really know a lot of tough people who are like violent. You know what I'm saying? Like I think he just wants to play the game, but like maybe he's shy. Who knows? Like there's so many reasons. Like I don't even want to talk about it anymore because it's over and done with. We like hashed it out. I confirmed that I didn't like cause any abuse or harm to this person, so they were in the wrong. And I think he was just like, okay, sounds good. But most people won't even apologize or ask for forgiveness. So it's like, Abby, you got to be tough in this world. Hey, hey, oh, sister. Okay, sister. Can't you just say androgenic alopecia, sister? Do you have to use that horrible S word that nasty chicken eater said? Can't you just say, sorry, John, I know you've got androgenic alopecia and you're my sister? Why are you so cruel? Oh, I know why. Because you are a fucking Nazi, you dirty bitch, you skinhead lover of fucking Diogenes Spooner. You're the skinhead lover. You're projecting, bitch. Sisters don't project to sisters. You ain't no sister, you dirty fucking hoe. You German slut, pig, bitch. Go back to Diogenes Spooner. Get lost, sister. You're no sister of mine. I think that I think the schizo guy was warning me about you, saying like you all suck, fuck them all. I think that's why he fucks with you guys, because he hates all of you. He thinks you're all trash. And maybe he's right. So you know what, sister? Fuck you, sister. See, the funniest thing is I have like a real sister, and like I would never talk to my real sister like that. So, you know, like I consider all sisters my sister. So, Abby, you know what? You're back in the circle of trust. My sister forgiveness circle's very quick. So, congratulations. You're back, sister. I forgive you, sister. I know what it's like to be fat and depressed, sister. This is like, oh, sister, don't cry. Sister, can you raise your hand and say something, sister? Because, like, sister's getting suspicious of sister. Oh, sister, you just made me drop my phone. My my dominoes of cell phones crashed. Instant karma.
Instant karma.
Nah, it happens. Like, it happened yesterday. It's very annoying. And it's all because, like, I'm sitting here laughing. You know, to me, this is so funny. So, you know, sister, I mean, I think, anyways, I hashed it out with my stalker. All is good. It's crazy.
Yeah, but like, who's the guy? Like, I think it's the same person with multiple accounts, and then he goes after, like.
It's Anthony. It's Anthony. That's the profile.
Yeah, but he's not really Anthony.
He's got two profiles. I agree. It's somebody fucking around who has
It's not really Anthony. He will change it to someone else soon.
I know. It's somebody that has a grudge against your clique, you know, or...
No, but not only my clique, but everyone. He has a grudge against Pepe, Lisa. Like, I think he just does it to everyone, and he just...
Anyways, his voicemails were
because I never interacted
creepy.
with this dude.
His voicemails were creepy to me.
Well, he can come over to Germany. I'm sure he can pass the board.
Anyways, he's neither here nor there. But this room is on record. I wouldn't be surprised if he listens to more.
Yeah, hi, stalker.
Okay, I'm co-modding you in the war. Together, we will be victorious.
I cannot talk much because my parents are around.
Your parents?
Mm-hmm.
Mama, Dada?
I mean, they are out now, but they will come back soon. Where are the other sisters at?
Oh, let's channel Danny. Where are other sisters? Well, Ryan is so annoying, and for God's sakes, Bussy has the dirtiest mouth I've ever heard on this app. Not actually, he's not. What's his face? DJ Pack is actually the most probably disgusting person I've ever heard on this app, but Bussy is really gross. And please,
Yeah, he can be.
If Bussy comes in, do not mod. Do not mod.
No, I won't. Did you see about this girl that spent 500 men in one day?
Yeah.
What do you think about?
It's disgusting beyond belief.
Yeah, what do you think about people forgiving her for what she did?
Well, good for them.
Do you think she's good looking?
Who?
Do you think this girl is beautiful?
Who?
This girl that had 100 men in one day.
No.
Lily.
How do you know this? The seven share a common mind, but the seventh has the power to disrupt thought. When you injured him, he lost control, so they saw you fighting. And now, he has recovered enough to shield himself from you once again. They want to make an alliance with you. Sometimes great enemies become allies so they can fight a common foe. Do they know how to kill him? I think for obvious reasons they won't answer that question. And I don't see how they can help. You're here to help them.
So the core consumer price index for November 2024 is up 3.3% year on year. So that's basically inflation at 3.3. That's the Fed prime rate.
Over the millennia, they have gathered vast resources that could help you in your hunt. The legend was passed down through the centuries concerning a book, the Oxydo Lumen. What do you know of this book? I now have proof that it exists. What are they saying? They're trying to decide whether you should live. How do you know this? The seven...
There's Abby left. She just pieced out. Sister just left sister. Instant karma. Oh, Abby's doing so much with herself.
And everlasting horror. And he's not quite sure how to do it. Because in Christianity there are two sins to be avoided, among others. One is called presumption, and that is knowing surely that you are saved. The other is called despair, which is knowing surely that you're damned. There's always a margin of doubt about this. Work out your salvation in fear and trembling.
You want to talk politics? All right.
So you might say that this is preeminently the gambler's religion. Imagine, in some great casino, late at night, there is some marvelous master gambler who's been winning all night. And then suddenly he decides to stake his whole winnings on whether the ball lands on red or black. Sensation! Everybody gathers from all over the casino to watch this terrific gamble. So in the same way, the predicament in which the Christian soul finds itself is this colossal gamble, which is saying this universe can possibly contain in it ultimate tragedy. There could be such a thing as an absolute, final, irremediable mistake. And what a horror that thought is. And so the Hindu is sitting in the audience, fascinated by this Christian's extraordinary, reckless gamble. He says, that's a beautiful game. The Christian doesn't know it's a game, but the Hindu suspects it is. And he's a little bit admiring it, but not quite involved.